This webinar was recorded for subrecipients of the Tennessee Strong Families Grant on November 5th, 2025. The webinar focused on learning interventions and useful tools to help families build a personal budget, triage debt and expenses, decide who to pay first when finances are tight, and make a spending plan. The slides and reference materials are posted on our webpage for your reference and review.
It's so good to be with you all, and I'm glad that other members of my team were with you as well. Clint and Shelley are awesome, and that program is such a fantastic resource. Today, we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite topic, which is budgeting. What I would encourage you to do, as Brooke has already said, please feel free to unmute and ask questions. Please ask questions in the chat. Brooke and Chase are going to help me monitor that chat. And it just makes for a really nice presentation when others are involved as well. So with that, I will get started. Well, I always love starting my presentation with a disclaimer because there's nothing like saying, hey, I really don't know what I'm talking about when you put in a disclaimer. But in all seriousness, today's presentation is educational in nature. And so it's not legal or financial advice. So if professional assistance is required, the services of a competent professional should be sought. Sorry, have to say that. So let's chat. Let's take a minute, and in the chat, I'd like for you to help me out with this question. Think about yourself or think about the individuals that you serve. Why do people typically not have a budget or stick to a budget? So think about yourself, think about the people you serve. Why do people not have a budget or stick to a budget? And drop it in the chat. And Chase and Brooke, if you all can just let me know what's coming in.
We have live paycheck to paycheck, little income to begin with. They don't understand them. Wants overrides needs. It can be overwhelming. Life happens. Not enough planning and prep. Lack of funds. Doesn't know how.
Doesn't know how. Those are all great ones, you all. And those are all things that I've heard before. And so I'll tell you from the very beginning, I believe that everyone should have a budget. Whether you have enough money to meet all your needs or whether you are just barely scraping by each month. A budget is nothing more than you telling your money what it's going to do for you instead of your money doing its own thing and then you learning about it. So when we talk about why people do not have a budget, this is what research has showed us. About 23% of folks say, hey, having a budget, it's not worth my time to do it. 18% say, I don't have the time to even think about it. 20-ish%, about 19%, said, hey, I've tried, and budgeting just does not work for me. And then, of course, 17% said, I spend all my money, so basically, why am I budgeting anyway? So the reasons that you all put in the chat are reasons that we've seen in research, and they're reasons that folks have told us time and time again. But we know that money management is important. Sadly, in 2024, American credit card debt hit the $1 trillion mark. We've been hanging out in the $1 billion range, and we are now at $1.16 trillion in credit card debt in the United States as of 2024. During the pandemic, we did really good. People started saving, people started reducing their debt, and then guess what happened? Things started to get better, things started to open up, people started to get jobs, and we kind of went back into this cycle of kind of this quasi-budget, money management, not really doing it type of phase. The same thing happened, if those of you might remember back during the Great Recession, when we had the housing bust and the economic downturn, we saw the exact same thing. People really started pulling together, getting their finances in order. But as soon as things got good, we kind of went back to our old behavior. And in Tennessee, we know that the typical family has about $5,000 in credit card debt that they carry month to month. So budgeting is important, and the statistics show us that it's important as well. So there are a variety of budgeting tools, and there's really no one perfect budgeting tool for you to use. There are a ton of great apps out there that are fantastic. I know my credit union where I bank has their own budgeting management software that's integrated into your online banking system. That's a great tool to use. What I would say is just pick a tool. Pick a tool that works for you. When we're talking about families that have limited resources, many times the idea of budgeting can be totally overwhelming. And in the past, we have pulled out these budget worksheets when we've worked with families in a similar situation, and you can just see their eyes just glaze over. It's so many spaces and so much money and so many dollar figures. So, what I have put together and what you can see here on your screen is a free, very easy budgeting tool. This does not cover everything, it does not cover every expense. But the whole idea with this tool is to just get people started. And I really based this off of a workbook that I saw many years ago that was a financial workbook that was used with incarcerated women. And it was looking at helping them to start budgeting as they were going back out after being justice involved. And so I really wanted to put together something that had that kind of same feel and that same kind of simple layout to it. So this is free. Download this. Brooke will be sending you the QR code and the links as well. But I would encourage you, this is a great tool. We do have a more comprehensive budgeting tool, but I think for the individuals that you serve, I would stick to just a very basic budgeting plan. When we talk about budgeting, we really talk about what do we have coming into the household. And we also know that there's two different kinds of income in general as for earning income through a job. We have the money that we actually earn, which is our gross income. And sadly, that is not the money that we take home. Instead, we take home the net income of what we have after pay, taxes, deductions, health insurance, everything else is taken out. So it's very interesting. You know, if you go to apply for a mortgage, they'll use your gross income. You go to apply for other types of loans, many times they'll use your gross income. But for our budgeting purposes, we really are focused on what do we actually have coming in. For families that maybe have assistance, we also want to include those dollars as income as well. And you'll notice on the previous budget form, there's actually a place for folks to specify what they have coming in each month or each week. Basically, once we know that net income, we know what we have to work with. And basically, then it becomes our job to give every single dollar that we have to work with a purpose. Make that dollar work and make it do something. So when we talk about making our money work and tracking our money, we know that there are a variety of ways to do this. And really looking at what you're spending will help you as you start budgeting the expenses that you have each week or each month. You might decide to pull out all your receipts and look at your receipts. You might go back and look at old bills to see what you have each month. You might look at credit card statements to see what you've paid, bank statements or check registers. Some of you don't know what check registers are, so just leave me a question in the chat and I'll answer that one later. You might look at check stubs and canceled checks. Again, that's probably foreign language for some folks. Or you might look at your calendar to kind of jog your memory. Whatever you do, you want to really start to get a handle on where your money is going. Because once we have a kind of general idea of where our money is going, that's when we're really going to start to categorize it and we're going to start to put it in to specific places within our budget. Now, as you get to pulling your money together and you get to looking at what you've been doing with your money just on a week or monthly basis, you can start to categorize your expenses. And the reason that we categorize expenses will become evident here in a second. But I really want to start in this middle column. All of us have fixed expenses as part of our budget. These are those expenses that are going to stay the same pretty much month after month. If you think about it, your car payment is an example of a fixed expense. When you signed up for that type of loan, you signed up and agreed to pay X number of dollars at X% for a certain amount of time. Your mortgage and your rent, child support payments. Those are all examples of fixed expenses. Fixed expenses are unique because it's very hard to do anything with these expenses. When you've signed up for a 30-year mortgage at $1,700 a month, it's really hard to get out of that 30-year mortgage at $1,700 a month. There's not a lot of changing that you can do there. You might refinance, but that's going to take a lot of time, and that's going to take, or it'll take some time and it'll take money. When you sign up for an auto loan and you're paying who knows what, $700 a month for 7 years. I can't believe we're even financing automobiles for 7 years now. But we're financing these things. It's really hard to change that amount of your auto loan. Where we have the ability to make changes is really when we talk about controllable expenses over on the right-hand column. These are expenses that we can adjust with some small changes to our behavior. Your grocery bill is one example. Your utilities, how much you save, expenses in your household, for example, on clothing, cleaning equipment, entertainment, dinners out, club memberships, sporting events, those sorts of things. And then your travel. Those are all controllable expenses that you will be able to tweak once we start putting this budget together. The column over on the left is the column that gets us, and it gets us every time. These are the expenses that we forget, but we still need to think about them as part of our budget. Medical bills are hard to predict, but we know that we still have to think about medical bills, medications, those sorts of expenses. Taxes, for those of us who pay property taxes, if you don't have those taxes escrowed, guess what? They come to you in the mail. I'm sitting here at my desk and I am looking at my Knox County City and my my Knoxville City and my Knox County tax statement sitting over here beside me. And every October, I'm like, oh crap, I forgot I have to pay these again. They happen every year, but they don't happen regularly. Car repairs are another one. And then, of course, holiday spending, especially as we come up on the holiday season. These type of expenses that happen every now and then we call periodic expenses. And these are the top expenses that can really bust your budget if you're not thinking about them and having a plan for what to do.
I was just going to hop in real
Go for
quick.
it.
I think that left column that you were just talking about is probably really difficult for a lot of the families that our folks are working with, especially because they're all expectant parents, right? And so like all those things end up popping up. And so we may get into this later, but is there anything off the top of your head that you can think of to like tools to help them prepare for those things that are unexpected?
It's tough to prepare for those unexpected things. If we talk about something like, let me take holiday spending. So we've got the holiday season coming up. What I would suggest is that is something that you're budgeting for every month, that you're putting aside a certain amount of money so that when December gets here or the end of November gets here, you have that pot of money set aside so you can make those holiday purchases. It's really hard, especially for low-income families, to think that way because, life happens. And life happens in magnified real time for families with limited resources. But we would suggest that you think about how could you take those expenses and plot them out so you know how much you need to set aside each month. The same thing with this idea of property taxes if you don't have them escrowed. Looking at, I kind of know what my taxes are going to be every year. How much do I need to put aside on a regular basis so I'm not surprised with that bill at the end? Many times it's these periodic expenses that families have to turn to credit cards to meet. So, for example, I get the flat tire and I have to have a new tire. I don't have the money for it. Or my car breaks down. It's not working. It's the only vehicle I have. It's the only way I have to work. I got to get it repaired. So those periodic expenses can wreak havoc on our budget. Great question, Brooke. So as we talked about our expenses and we talked about tracking our expenses, there are a variety of tools that you can use. We talked about some already, but I'm going to introduce a real simple tool on the next page that just does not involve technology or anything. I'll be honest, I have tracked my expenses before. If you've never tracked your expenses, folks, do it for a week. It is a humbling experience. It's a lot like downloading MyFitnessPal and tracking what you eat for a week. It's a humbling experience. You do not realize the money you are spending, much like you don't realize the calories you're consuming, or at least I didn't. You don't realize, oh, I went through the drive-through and got coffee. Or oh me, I went to Chick-fil-A this morning and got an unsweet tea because I felt like I needed it because I was up so early. Those can really add up over time. So whether you use any of these tools that you see listed here or you use the ones that we have, it is important that you just get in the practice of at least tracking your expenses and doing it for 1 week. And one of the things that I recommend is this simple, low-tech method. You take a piece of paper, copy paper, 8.5 by 11, and you fold it in half. And then you fold that paper into 4 sections, just like an accordion. If some of you remember folding paper fans when you were little, that's kind of what you're doing here. And basically, when you fold that paper, 8 sections, folding it 4 times, you get a perfect way to track your expenses each day: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then in the 8th piece or the 8th column, you can actually do a total and make notes. This is so easy because this you can drop in your purse. Guys, you can put it in your wallet. This is something you can put in your pocket and carry with you. And all you have to do is just simply jot down what you spend as you spend it. So this morning I was up with the Chick-fil-A. I would jot down unsweet tea. And oh my gosh, I think it's 300, it's $3 or something like that right now, whatever amount that is. So I keep up with it, and then I can go back and look, because that's really going to give you an idea of kind of where your money is going. I would not be worried if you're just starting out budgeting about, am I doing it right? Do I have everything? Am I spending as I'm supposed to be spending? I would just worry about, let me get an idea of what's happening with my finances, and I can make adjustments and tweaks after I get something down on paper. But this is a great, easy, simple way to track spending. And this QR code will take you to a publication that we've put together that walks you step by step on how to track your spending. It shows you how to do the old-fashioned paper method that I've shown you. It talks a little bit about using apps to track your spending as well. What I would say is, whatever you use, just first figure out what you're spending, because then we're going to categorize it later as we start putting that budget together. Any thoughts, questions, comments before we go on? Once we pull together those expenses, we then can go back to our budgeting form and we can start to plug those into different categories. Categories of living expenses, categories of utilities, categories of groceries, foods out, all of those sorts of things. And then we actually can make adjustments in what we're spending and actually make adjustments on paper of what we hope to spend in each of those categories. I've always said that budgets are living, breathing documents. They're meant to be scribbled on, erased, thrown in the trash, start all over again. You're not pouring concrete when you make a budget. You're really just trying to get a handle on where your money's going. You're going to have to make adjustments as you go, and that's quite all right. And folks, you're not going to get it right. I cannot tell you how many stupid money mistakes I have made in my life, right? How many times that I have blown my budget. And this is what I teach on a daily basis. It happens. Life happens. We're human beings. The whole idea is, are you moving forward on a track of where you're trying to get control of your finances versus your finances controlling you? So I wanted to show you, this is an example budget for someone that has $3,600 coming into their household. Now, ignore the middle column, the percent of income. We're not going down that road. But what you can see is you can look and see how this person has allocated their money. The third line down, they have $980 something going to housing. They've got about $500 going to transportation. They've got some money set aside, $400 for food. They've got some personal care items that they purchase. They have money for health care and also health insurance. I'm assuming in this particular example that insurance is not coming out on the front end of their paycheck. They're paying it through another party. They even have a budget line item for clothes, for entertainment, for donations, charitable donations, or giving to church. They have this other category for life insurances. They also are being honest with themselves that yes, they might buy alcohol and tobacco and they've put it in as part of their budget. And then they have this miscellaneous category as well. Not really sure that I like a miscellaneous category, but we've got one on here. But we can see that this person certainly has a problem with their budget. And this might be the case for you or folks you work with. You only have $3,600 per month coming in. And in this case, they're spending $3,900. So they have about a $350 shortfall that they're going to have to adjust this budget and make some changes. Now, $350, that's a pretty good chunk of change to take out of some of these items. And so then it becomes the point of going back and asking yourself, where are those flexible or controllable expenses that we talked about on that very first slide? Where are those and what changes can I make? So what can I do to change expenses when it comes to food? What can I do to change expenses when it comes to personal care or clothing or entertainment? What can I do when it comes to alcohol, tobacco, and other types of things that you might buy? So you really do, once you get this down on paper, have to make those adjustments. And you also have to make those adjustments based on what you spend in actuality as well. When we trim expenses, we find those areas where there are spending leaks. We can look at those areas that we can change with controllable expenses. And ultimately, we have to come up with strategies to plug those leaks, whether it's just little bits of money that are going away here and there, or whether we need to make changes in what we spend in groceries, utilities, and some of those controllable expenses. What I think you'll find is if you track your expenses for a week, you are going to find that we all have spending leaks. And little bitty leaks can certainly sink a ship very quickly. And believe it or not, little bitty leaks can add up over time. And one of the things that I like to call these little leaks in our budget is budget busting small expenses. They're little. We don't know that we're doing them and that they're happening, but boy, can they really wreak havoc on our budget. In our previous example, they probably helped to contribute to that shortfall that that person had. So I want to show you on the next page some of these spending leaks. So bear with me, we're going to nerd out here for a minute. On the left-hand column, I have listed some spending leaks. Y'all, no judgment. I am not judging if you're going to happy hour. I'm not judging if you're buying lottery tickets. I don't care if you are doing streaming services. It does not matter to me. You do you. You're all adults. What I'm just pointing out here is what is the cost of this? What is the cost per pack of cigarettes? What is the cost weekly to go out with friends? What is the cost for lunch, for those subscription services? So you can see that I've listed all of the costs down in that second column. And these are just estimated costs as well. For example, with specialty coffee, I said, okay, maybe you go 5 times a week. And across those 5 times, you spend about $27.50. So then what I did is I said, all right, if we're doing this a day or if we're doing this a week, what happens in a month? What happens and how much money have I spent in a month? So for example, I'm going to use my own personal example, being very vulnerable, and that's happy hour with friends. There's nothing better than making it through to Friday and you're like, oh, finally, I'm going to have a drink and going out with friends. And so maybe you spend $35. But if you do this every Friday for every month, you've dropped $140 on happy hour with friends. If you take that math on out and you say, I'm doing this every Friday for every month for 12 months a year, at the end of the year, you've almost spent $1,600 on happy hour with friends. The one that really surprises me is the meal subscription service. That even if I just get a weekly service for two and it costs me $60, I'm spending almost $250 a month on a meal subscription like the HelloFresh and all those things that show up at your door, spending pretty close to 3,000 bucks a year on meal services. It really adds up. Not to mention the streaming services, which really add up as well. In fact, I, decided the other day I was going to take my own advice. I went back through and started looking at what all had been coming out of my checking account. And it is amazing how much Amazon stuff comes out. Amazon Prime Music, Amazon Prime Video, Amazon something something doorbell service. I'm like, I don't even remember when I signed up for this stuff. And so it really starts to add up over time. So you've got the picture here. This small leak, it's adding up. So then I took it a step further actually in the publication itself. And when you look in the publication, I then said, what would happen if we saved this money in a savings account at a certain interest rate? Or what would happen if we invested this money for 10 years at a certain rate of return? And so I'm going to just give you that tease that to go look at that publication and you can see how those numbers work themselves out. It really is pretty humbling. It actually makes me rethink my happy hour with friends. And maybe I don't want to cut that happy hour out totally, but maybe I do want to reduce the amount of money I'm spending once I see what I could be doing with that money. Okay, any questions about small expenses now that I've stepped on everybody's toes and made everybody uncomfortable? And, any questions? All right, go ahead, Brooke. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just those little things do add up. Like you said, I see Crystal said in the chat, went through my streaming services. It was a lot. I think I had them all. And Crystal, that has like similarly happened to me too. It's like, oh man, I didn't realize I had Audible and Netflix and Hulu. And like, I don't even watch all these things. Like, why am I paying for these? But if you're not, like you said, Chris, like keeping a watch on your bank account and what's drafting, you're like, oh man, I didn't even realize I had all this.
Or you do like me. HBO Max, Prime, whatever, had some show I wanted to see, and oh my gosh, the first 2 months were free, and I knew I could watch that show in the first 2 months, and then I would cancel it, and guess what? Life happens, and I forgot to cancel it.
That's how they get us.
That's how they get us. Or, full disclosure, I noticed my hair was getting thin and signed up for the Hims shampoo and hair treatment, and yeah, try to cancel that. I actually had to Google how to cancel my Hims order because that was 30 something bucks a month and I had more shampoo than I would ever need. I don't know why they said, they kept sending me bottles and bottles of shampoo, but it was really hard. It took a lot of effort on my end. It's really easy to sign up for those streaming services. It's really hard on the back end to get out of those streaming services. And yeah, I had to actually Google how to get away from Hims. It was very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about budgeting and when the reality hits that, hey, we've made our budget and it just doesn't work and we can't pay everything. And it happens, folks. It happens to the people you work with. It's happened to maybe people that you know, maybe folks in your family. Certainly right now in the economic situation that we're living in with reduction in SNAP benefits, this is certainly a reality for families. And so when that becomes a reality, we really have to start asking ourselves, how do I make this work? How do I get through this patch of my life where I just cannot pay everything, where my budget just will not meet? Now, what I'm talking about here is when you've exhausted every option that you have, right? We have cut back on eating out. We have cut back on streaming services. we're now looking at the fact that we can't even provide for the basics. So let me give you like this huge caveat. I am not advocating that anyone not pay their bills, right? So please, please, no one, phone up Dondi Plowman and tell them that I am doing a webinar telling folks that they should not be paying their bills. I am saying that there are times in a crisis when you have to triage your bills. If you go to an emergency room and you go in with a broken arm, chances are you're not going to get seen as quickly as someone who's coming in with a heart attack or someone, who has their arm cut off and they're holding it in their lap. You've got to do the same thing with your budget when you just don't have enough money. You have to really triage. So, from the very beginning, I'm saying I'm not telling anybody not to pay their bills, but I am saying let's look at how can we be systematic. And that's what we're going to talk about on the next page. There are basically three things to do if you find yourself or your participants in a situation where they can't pay their bills. First of all, stop all unnecessary spending, right? We already talked about that. Streaming services are gone, money transfers are gone, eating out is gone. All of these unnecessary things are cut out of the budget. We're getting down to really the basics of living, those four walls, food, clothing, shelter that we have to have in life. If you cannot pay all your bills, you still need to make a budget because you've got to figure out what you can pay and what you might be able to pay on some of those bills. And then you really have to determine your priorities. What we know many times when people get in a situation where they cannot make payments and they just cannot pay everything, they get into a situation of paralysis. And so they just don't make decisions. It happens to us all the time when there are stressful events in our lives. You can think about when a loved one is sick or when someone passes. We've all been there where we just don't make decisions. We can't make decisions. In this particular case, many people will only start paying the bills if people are hounding them about it. And so that is not really the best option. Instead, what we have to do is really look at what are the priority levels. And so I've put together 3 priority levels. And y'all, these are not just me. These hold out across research. They hold out across people in financial management. But basically, the essential things first are those basic needs. We have to keep our family fed. Now, we're going to be doing smart shopping strategies. We are going to be using emergency food assistance like food banks, food pantries. We're going to be using churches. We're going to be using SNAP benefits. We're going to be using anything that we can. We got to keep ourselves healthy. We've got to keep taking the medicines that we need to take. If you're a diabetic, you certainly don't want to be skimping on insulin. That's only going to get you into a worse situation than what you're in. You've got to maintain some form of housing. You and your family have to have a place to live. You have to have a place that has heat, a place that has water, a place that has electricity. And then we also need some form of reliable transportation. That transportation might mean that we sell a car and we just get a junker. It might mean that we are taking the bus. It might mean that we're walking to work. It might mean that we're biking to work if we're close enough. But all of the level 1 priorities are intended first to meet those basic human needs. Think back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're trying to meet those basic needs. But also, all these level 1 priorities are positioning you so you can move and make more money in the future. If you don't have food to eat, a place to sleep, your medical needs met, and a way to get to work reliably, you're not going to be able to get out of the financial situation that you're in. So that's what we're doing with level 1 priorities. Level 2 priorities. Level 2 priorities would include those sorts of things like student loans, taxes, legal judgments, child support. I'm not advocating that you don't pay child support by any stretch of the imagination. What I am saying is you've got to start communicating a plan and start working out a plan. The last thing that we would pay is usually the first thing that people pay because it is the credit card companies It's the installment loan companies for furniture and appliances and electronics that will hound you the most to try to get payment. What the credit card companies know is that that is an unsecured debt. There is nothing they can come after to get that money back that you have charged on that credit card. With my mortgage, UT Credit Union can come after and take the house if I don't pay the mortgage. With my car, they can come take the car if I don't pay the car payment. So that's why many folks pay the credit cards first before they even pay the rent or before they even pay their car payment, because again, they're in that situation of paralysis where they are just responding to who's yelling the loudest at them. And so, really, what this forces us to do is number one, it forces us first to admit that we can't pay everything. I think that's usually the hardest thing that we have to admit first before we sit down and do this. But the other thing that this forces us to do is it forces us to look really systematically at what we're spending and to make some really, really tough choices. Talking about it here, it seems easy. I promise you, in reality, this is not easy. Everyone in the family has conflicting goals. There are different wants and needs, and it's really, really tough to get everyone on the same page. So I'll tell you, one time I was teaching a class about this, and I actually gave everybody in the class pieces of paper. I gave them these expenses, and I said, all right, order them. Tell me what you're spending first, what you're paying second, what you're paying third, right? So they did child support, student loans, mortgage, utilities, everything else. People just were not getting it. They were just going through the motions. And so then, and by the way, this was a church group. So then I gave them all pieces of paper that said tithes and offering. So here we are in a church. And I said, okay, you can't pay all your bills. Where does this go? And wow, you talk about the emotion. You talk about people getting upset. And really, I had to de-escalate and tell them the purpose of this was just to show you this is what happens in reality in families. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of people upset. That's what makes this so very difficult when it comes to figuring out who gets paid first, who gets paid second, and who gets paid third. Last thing I'll say before I beat this horse to death is if you cannot pay your bills, you have to contact your creditors. When I worked with low-income families at the start of my career, and I've worked with them on and off throughout my career, people think that if I don't contact the people that I owe money, they're just going to forget about it. Creditors are more likely to work with you if you reach out to them first. If they have to chase you down, they're less likely to work with you. So I would encourage you, the first person that your folks need to contact are your creditors, to let them know what you're doing and to let them know the situation that you're in. Just to point out, believe it or not, eating out is a really big expense that folks can trim. We actually spend out about $4,000 in the US per family per year eating out. That's 2023 data. If you go out to lunch every day, $10 a meal, you'll be spending about $2,500 a day on lunches out. Of course, we know that some basic changes in meal planning, in prepping our meals, in actually sticking to a menu, sticking to a grocery list can make a huge difference. I will say that I am a huge fan of garage sales and reselling as a way to help you stretch your dollar. What's really exciting is a lot of millennials are thrifters. And so it is kind of the cool thing to do. And in fact, about 16 to 18% of folks in the United States say that they thrift. And boy, do you have an option. There's about 25,000 thrift stores and consignment and resale stores in the US. So you certainly have an outlet for saving money on clothes and household items as well. Of course, encouraging our families to use the public library. The public library is a wonderful resource. Even in some of our most rural areas of Tennessee, we have great libraries. I think back where I grew up in rural East Tennessee, we had a really good library, a place for internet access, a place that you could go for renting or for checking out books, and really just an awesome way to have some free entertainment. And then, of course, we know the strategy of clipping coupons only, though, if you really are going to need the item. Don't just buy it because you have a coupon for it. And those are ways that you can certainly save as well. And I'm going to I'm going to pop down to the bottom of this slide to point out something very, very important. If we can ever get to a point to building an emergency fund, it is amazing how much of our money worries will go away. When I worked with folks many, many years ago who were receiving assistance, I really just encouraged them to save $1 a day if they could, whether it was loose change, whether it was something. Any amount is better than nothing. I hate when people start talking about, oh, you need to have 3 months, 6 months, 10% of your income, all of this saved up. I'm not concerned about that. I am concerned about people actually saving money. That's a great goal to get to, but let's just put something away. Putting as little away as $50 can make a huge difference between a crisis in life and something that you can address and move on from there. And then finally, if you're able, always paying yourself first is the thing to do. Once you get to where you have a budget, where you are able to meet all your expenses, make savings align in that budget. Every month, put something away into that emergency fund, put something away into that retirement account, put something away so you have it for when life happens, when you get into those situations where you don't have enough money to make ends meet. Again, it makes all the difference in the world paying yourself and having some money up front. So, with that, sorry for rushing through there at the end. It always happens. I start to run out of time with that. I'm going to see if there's any questions, comments, concerns, or disagreements with anything that I have said.
Asia says set up a savings account that rounds up your spending to the nearest dollar. So like your spare change. That's a good idea. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes. My credit union started doing this. I love credit unions, but sometimes we're late to the game. And so, wow, it is amazing how that adds up. And then the credit union actually will put that rounded up change into a savings account at a 5% interest rate. That's crazy. So I am like not touching that money. But it is nice to see you go back and you're like, wow, that change really adds up. And that was one of the things that I was trying to get the families that I was working with way back in the day to realize is just throwing change to the side will add up and will help you have some kind of savings. Great point.
Crystal says, I have a Chime account that gives you a credit builder credit card that is now offering 1.5% cash back on grocery purchases.
Really? That's interesting.
Which groceries, again, that's
Yeah,
basic needs. That's great.
Oh, great. Credit score's gone up 40%, 40 points rather. Sorry. Pay it off every month. And, don't do like me who opened up the account, was going to get the great benefits, charged what I needed to, paid it off, but forgot that I also charged like some stupid $20 charge and forgot to pay it. And, yeah, you have to keep on top of these things. Yeah. Oh, it automatically pays off. Excellent. That's what I have to have in my life. I'm at the point in my life where I have to have automatic bill pay, or I will forget it, or I will mess it up. So thank God we're not still in the days where we had to write checks and mail them to pay the bills. I hope that something that was presented or the resources that shared will be valuable to you or valuable to your clients. Please feel free to share this information with them. These are tools just to get them started, even if they just start thinking about being good money managers and taking control of the finances. That's a step in the right direction.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Chris, so much for
Thank
presenting
you.
on this important topic and for giving us ideas for ourselves, but also for the families that we work with and kind of how to make it applicable to all of us. And for all these great worksheets. I think these will be really useful for a lot of the families that our subrecipients are working with. So we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they're all free. So download them, make copies, do whatever you want to with them.
Awesome. Okay, and I'll be sure that I send out to you all the links this afternoon as well with our training evaluation. And of course, we'll have our recording up on the webpage as soon as I get it edited this afternoon. And then we'll be back here, same time, same place next week with Chris for part 2. You want to give us like a quick, what are we doing for part 2 next week?
Part 2 is credit. So
Okay.
we will be talking about all things credit, including credit cards. So yeah, I'm excited about part 2. So remember that $1 trillion figure, we're going to talk about that.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, we will hopefully see you all next week. I'll send out the registration link for that one as well this afternoon. And thank you again, Chris, and thank you everybody for attending, and we'll see y'all next week.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Chase. Appreciate working with you all.